Well, it's already that time. The summer anime season is dying down, so I'm obligated to make a follow-up video to my preview, where we looked at the shows I picked and say whether they're worth watching or not. For posterity, I guess. Or because it gives people gratification that some rando YouTube personality agrees with them. Or because they want to argue down in the comments. Here's hoping you take the more mature route. Also subscribe if you want to see more content from me, I guess. Shameless plug right there. Shows that were good this season were pretty decent, with a solid mix of surreal, comedy that could actually get a laugh, and anime with some heart that drew the audience in. But I think the most important thing here is I'm not spending this section filleting the animation studios behind these, because it's the plot, characters, and execution that pulled most of them together. Well, that seems like I'm being facetious when the first pick is Bones' adaptation of Vanitas no Carte. Pretty much everything I praised about this series in my season preview followed through. Good animation that varied between intense action scenes, personality-packed comedic moments, and stunning background work that brought the world to life despite the contained cast of characters. Now, to be fair, the story had a chance to muck all that up, at least if it was as cliched as it could have been. But it dared to have characters deeper than their initial presentation whose complexity motivates the course of the story. I often mention how many anime become clusterfucks because they have too many balls in the air, balancing their boisterous cast with a complex story in a unique world, where they can't figure out what to focus on and the elements clash. But Vanitas masterfully weaves these elements together so that the world building informs the primary incidents of the plot and impacts the cast while working to get these things to add intrigue to each other. I'm honestly impressed, in spite of the majority of this series being Case of the Week style mini-arcs, but they feel as though they're amounting to something. If you like quirky characters, a twist of supernatural, light steampunk fantasy, and mystery with hype fight scenes, it's right up your alley. Really hoping this gets a season 2. Kanojo didn't just walk a tightrope where one misstep could mean tumbling off a cliff into the garbage anime pile, it did backflips the whole way across. Oh, and it stuck the landing too. In an anime where the cast is all too aware how absurd and idiotic the situations they're in are, they react with the same level of absurdity to create an insane spiral that absorbs everything. It's sort of in the same vein as the rom-com where the childhood friend won't lose, but it actually succeeds at it, instead of just being sad. I loved just about everything about this show, because not just is the premise and cast stupid, they're a likable bunch of idiots who make each other more likable. Like, sure, Saki is a self-centered moron, but she's oddly protective of her totally not a waifu rival, Nagisa, who's almost too innocent, she's weapons-grade dangerous. But not only is the main guy dating the two cutest girls in school, but a third girl shows up and she refuses to be a second-rate rival, immediately stealing the show. High energy in both its actors and animation keep this series intensely engaging, while playing up its strengths by making it fast-paced and light in tone, so it doesn't get bogged down in melodrama. This was the anime 2021 deserves. I'm not saying that to be disparaging. I took a gamble this season with Kageki Shoujo, and let's just say it paid off gangbusters. One of the main things that kept me coming back each week was the intense growth these characters go through, as they're hit with a once-in-a-lifetime chance to join a major acting troupe that's attached to a school with lower admission rates than most colleges. But it looks at that point of getting in, where most other shows like this would put that as an end goal, and has it serve as the inciting incident. Their dreams of being famous actors in this troupe aren't assured just because they got in, and they have to deal with harsh hazing from their seniors, strict conformity to the standards of beauty, and the reality that only a few of their classmates will rise to the top to be stars, while the rest are doomed to play background parts. But seeing their baggage from before they got in and how it impacts who they are, how they act, and how they have to overcome it in order to make it in the acting world really makes the cast endear to the audience. I got lost in these girls here, because each is the main character of their own story, and it all works well together. Uramichi-Oniisan spoke to me, to the point I'm not entirely convinced that some Japanese mangaka isn't paying a team to tail me for inspiration. This series is about a depressed, alcoholic, chain-smoking, jaded guy in his early 30s working in children's entertainment, and he hates his job. Big surprise. And no, not because the kids he works with, but because the show itself is mentally taxing on him. The dark, sarcastic humor struck a chord with me in the same way that Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei did. But this series feels more genuine in its presentation. It allows for the characters to be characters, as well as why they put up their shitty situations, giving a glimpse that Uramichi actually does this show to see the kids smile. But maybe it's because the voice actor for Uramichi is the same as Itoshiki's in Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei, and Ikiteru's is the same as Kotaro from Zombieland Saga, that I'm vibing off the cast too. Oh yeah, it's definitely the same energy. I fell in love with the humor in this series, and it had me laughing out loud on multiple occasions. KyoAni was back in top form with Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid Season 2. Season 2 hits really hard by giving some more backstory on the cast, some more character growth, as well as just nailing everything people loved in the first season. And in that regard, I think this is one of the better Season 2s in a long time, as it elevated the standards from the first, by adding a meaningful addition to the main cast, drawing better connections between the cast and audience, and just beefing up the animation in general. I just feel that this is an improvement from the first season entirely, so obviously it's going to be recommended. I was really torn on where to put Sonny Boy this season, because this anime evokes a lot for me. There's been a number of anime trying to ride the 90s nostalgia train for a while now, but this series felt like the first to actually nail that vibe, and that vibe being the more weird stuff like Serial Experiments Lane and such, where things really just aren't explained well and a lot is up to interpretation, plus there's some trippy visuals to go with it, all while sticking to that same sort of line work used in older anime to make it look rougher. So here's my crossroads. I'm torn on where to put this series because I like it a lot, but its pacing is a disaster, and its plot is needlessly confusing, but it still harkens back to when anime could be more loose and experimental. The fact that this series doesn't have a real story doesn't bother me, because the cast have strong characterization, and the subsequent contained arcs are interesting, as it explores the psyche of people through those surreal worlds. It's honestly something people should check out, but I'm not saying you'll like it, because it's more of an experience and a lot is on the viewer to actively engage with the series, rather than just sit back and be told a story. Which damn, that's probably why I'm placing it here, since it still does all that despite its supposed nostalgia baiting. Not everything this season was praiseworthy. Some things were just okay, where they tripped over a few spots, or they're good if you're a fan of the franchise already. So this is the part where we get into my conditional recommendations, where these lack blanket appeal. I feel like in spite of getting further into its plot and raising the stakes, Tensei keeps slipping further down the list every time I cover it. So the down and dirty is this part covered the payoff of the previous core, while giving us some good fights. But even though it delivered on what it promised, it still felt hollow and padded. This is because, sure, Veldora is finally free and Rimuru's finally a demon lord, so Tempest is a force to be reckoned with, but this season spends multiple episodes catching characters up on things the audience is already privy to. You achieved your goal of build-up, so don't spend an additional 7 episodes building further. Get to the damn point, or else the audience is gonna get antsy, and that's where I was with this season, much like the last, where the end was good, but getting there was a chore. Fans check it out, but everyone else? I can't say Season 2 will draw you in despite the raised stakes. Bokutachi no Remake was another tough pick, because I liked not just the plot of the guy getting a second chance at life to do what he always wanted and be an active supporter of the creators he liked, but also how well it handled that by showing the consequences of his actions. How his impact sort of takes the wind out of their sails, causing these creators to rely on him so they never struggle, and thus gain faith in themselves. I mentioned how I was cautiously optimistic of this show in my season preview, because I wasn't sure which direction it would go, but it chose right. So why is it down this far? Because it sort of dabbles in the mundane melodrama associated with anime from the time period this is taking inspiration from, where slice-of-life shows like to introduce secret fiancés, pointless love triangles, and none of that really amounts to anything. The core of this is good, but it's a bit bloated. It's on the better side of this slot, so check it out for people looking for a decent time-slip series. On the other end of that spectrum, Boy Riverside barely managed to float its way up here from being further down. It's a well-animated shonen action series that didn't have much to say, so it relied on a dumb gimmick to build more intrigue. Did that work? Somewhat. I'm more annoyed than invested at deciphering the timeline of this show, and it's not exactly a complex series of events. So we're left with a franchise that builds up a fight, and then jumps to a different episode 4 down the line or something. That's fucking annoying. So the question that broke that was, if I were to rewatch this in chronological order, would I enjoy it? And the answer is, probably, but not enough to say I'd like it. This has an audience, teens who enjoy over-the-top bloody action and simplistic characters to not distract from that, but that's not me. As Season 2 of Hametsu fell a bit flat on its face, about midway through its season. The first arc felt like a bit of a rehash from the previous season, After that, dragged its feet, which is a shame because season 1 was so great. If they left it at that, I can't imagine fans would have been disappointed as it wrapped up the storylines, which is why we're here right now. The franchise had wrapped up its threads and wanted to keep going, so we're floundering trying to find a new one to go with. Here's hoping season 3 is a bit better. Going off light novel spoilers, it's supposed to be at least. JC Staff's adaptation of Shinigami Bocchan to Okura Maid really had potential. My problems with this series are minor, as in, the pace of the story felt disjointed. Oh, let me guess. You thought I was going to complain about the CG. The first half was pretty damn enjoyable, while building towards something. But after that initial payoff, it fell hard on what to do next. There were still some threads dangling, but it wasn't quick to introduce something to keep me interested, which meant we were left with the one-note joke of he can't touch anyone, while the maid teases him with her big tits. And that got old. I honestly wish the manga was over, so the anime could have finished the storyline because so many franchises are ruined by overstaying their welcome. That's kinda what this did. Check it out if you like old-timey aesthetics and dirty jokes. I liked Meikyuu Black Company more than I should have, and that's saying something considering its placement. It has some interesting things to say about Japanese corporate culture, takes an interesting spin on the whole isekai genre by showing a dude who's miserable there, and literally nothing goes in his favor, even if it looks like it is, on top of using a protagonist whose main shtick is, he's a selfish ass who wants to screw everyone over so he can live an easy life without caring about how he does that. Those elements all work to set this apart from the rest of the isekai pack. So why does it fail? Because with all those things working in its favor, it tries to do this absurdist one-upsmanship that fails, because the characters are already too exaggerated for that to work, while telegraphing its jokes too much. Plus the animation here is just sort of bad, with thick outlines, stiff movements, and corners cut. Now that does kinda underline the comedy at times, but where some series use more simplistic animation for that, this uses it for the entire series. Even at moments it's trying to look badass and cool. Not a bad isekai, but there are better comedy ones out there. Now that we've made it through the tolerable stuff, let's take a look at the things that failed so hard they deserve to be left in obscurity. These are the shows I wouldn't recommend people to check out because they sucked, for one reason or another, or sometimes multiple. How the realist hero rebuilt the kingdom could have been something worth a look, much in the same way that Cautious Hero poked fun at isekai for deconstructing battle tropes. I would have liked to have seen a realist deconstruct the typical magical fantasy societies by dismantling the oligarchy, improving living conditions worldwide, and instituting farming, construction, and public works reforms. And this did those, but lessened the deconstruction of the genre by laughing at how absurd the city sim aspect of modern isekai is, and more doing that unironically. It still has the dude getting a weird power that's sort of OP, has him rule a kingdom better than anyone else, and makes him one step ahead of everyone for no reason besides the plot says so. It lacks an organic sense to the reasoning and still dabbles in the tired isekai tropes that make this another in a long line. So why watch this over any other? No, I'm legitimately asking that question. I can't think of a reason. Just how far has Higurashi fallen? My main problem with Go was that it felt like a rehash of the original series. That was at least excusable by tricking the audience into thinking it was a remake for the first episode, before making twists on the familiar scenarios we'd seen. It fell apart by sticking too closely to the formula, but we had answers by the end of the season. Now Sotsu pops up to continue rehashing? Why? Okay, I got it. Sadako was behind everything. I don't need to see 12 episodes of how she engineered all these situations. Get to the point on why you dug up Higurashi's corpse to parade around in 2021 already. The issue isn't just rehashes, it's that the storyline hasn't moved forward since the midpoint of Go. So like, 24 episodes now? It's just been explaining the how of that. And it really didn't have to. Sure, there's stuff going on with Hanyu and whatever this Umineko character is, but that didn't need 24 episodes to unpack either. A pace slower than molasses killed this for me. And speaking of killing its premise, Tante wa mo shindeiru, I dropped after about 6 episodes because it couldn't move past its premise. Okay, so the pitch is the aftermath where the famous detective died and now the main character, her assistant, is stepping up to mentor a girl who found him and takes on the detective role. So then it spends not only its first hour-long episode in a flashback to set up its premise, it keeps going back in time to show us his time with Siesta. If you want to do a story about Siesta, do it. quit flashing back when the premise is someone stepping up to take her place, maybe? I was frustrated at stagnancy again. But this time, I just didn't stick it out. Which sucked, because I honestly thought this would be pretty good. Seirei Gensoki is just the most isekai an isekai can be. Like, it embodied the worst tropes of the genre, with the main dude getting reincarnated, given amazing powers in the first episode, but he's mistreated, and still becomes the most gentlemanly of all dudes despite everyone treating him poorly. He gets a harem, he's out for revenge, and has a power that'll probably make him the focal point of that world before long. Yeah, any problem this had with the conflicting memories causing an identity crisis is abandoned shortly after it's brought up. Plus, the guy lacks a strong personality for easy audience self-insertion. Literally, there's no reason to watch this anime over any other isekai. It's that generic. Another isekai to dump on is Drugstore. I was really hoping this would be a good series that had some dumb slice-of-life comedy. And it did, but the slow life in the title wasn't an exaggeration. This whole series had drawn-out punchlines with wind-up on par with Continental Drift, random music interludes to pad the runtime by recycling animation, and me wondering why this is even an isekai in the first place. I dropped this series because I asked myself, what was I coming back for each week? When I couldn't answer that was pretty much the end of my time watching it. I'm sure there are fans who enjoy slow, slice-of-life isekai, but there are seriously more engaging ones out there than this. Where Sonny Boy captured the essence of 90s anime people like, Megami Ryo no Ryobokun felt like a throwback that missed the mark. It has the feel of a 90s anime, sure, but for all the wrong reasons. That being, it expertly captures the ecchi and brain-dead premise, but didn't really do anything with those besides keep flashing tits on screen, hoping that would get the audience to stick around. I'm just not a horny teenager anymore, so that wasn't gonna do it. I dropped this series after a few episodes when it was clear there wasn't going to be much character growth, the entire point was just fan service, and they started sexualizing a middle school girl. Yeah, that's the time to bail. If I had anything worse than don't watch, this would end up there. But I don't, so this is as bad as it gets. So that's it. Summer 2020 was an odd mix of good shows that surprised me by how good they were. Not ones I would typically enjoy either, which was an extra treat. But tell me what you thought down in the comments below. Which shows were your favorites? Anyway, with summer dying down, fall's around the corner already, so we're going to be seeing what's coming next real soon. But for now, hey, you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also support me over on Patreon. There you get to vote on what I'm doing next, especially for my season previews. You get to vote on what I'm watching, so check that out. It only costs $1. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to give a special thanks to Nadeshiko for their continued support. Thanks for watching.